Jammu, and due to travel restrictions, I'm unable to travel, then I would really like to have collaboration happening with the local architect there. So who can do the site visits, who can do the supervision, who can translate our drawings. But I don't think that collaboration would happen in terms of design delegation. Design delegation, I think, should happen at one place. You cannot be delegating, collaborating on a design thing, because that, as Pony also rightly said, it shouldn't get diluted. The main architect's vision should stay. You can give out, you can start your collaboration by even preparation of drawings, by giving that out for collaboration. At those levels, I think collaboration works wonderfully. And given COVID scenarios where you don't know when we will be hit with another lockdown, or when what kind of travel restrictions will be there. So I think it's something we should definitely look at. It would be movement in a very positive way. And likewise, if there is work happening outside and we need to collaborate on behalf of international architects or something, I think it really makes a lot of sense, especially given the restrictions that are in place.
Thank you so much. That was quite informative. I'm sure a lot of our architects, interior designers would get a lot of information from that. Santa and Puni ma'am, our fourth question would be asked by a product designer, Mr. Chakravarti. So I would like to call him. He has a question. So Mr. Chakravarti, if you could just come online and ask the question and just introduce yourself. Yeah, thank you. Chakri, your audio is off. We are not able to hear you. Unable to hear you. Maybe what we can do is unable to hear you, Chakri. What we can do is we can take the fifth question and then we can come back to you. We can start with the question with our product manager, Mr. Bharat Verma, and then come back to you. So I would like to call Mr. Bharat Verma, and he has a question for both of you.
Okay. The phone cam nahi kar raha hai.
Yeah, good evening, ma'am. Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Ankita, for inviting for the question.
Yeah.
Actually, as we discussed, nowadays the new normal is coming up, and it may be short term or maybe long term also. I have you even from south also for west also, both of them. The question basically remain in around new normal only. Lots of people will avoid touching surfaces maybe because of these new things that is happening. So maybe new surfaces means new switches. The switches are there as a surface for them, and there are maybe some other products like at home, maybe the door knobs, and there are many other glass fittings are also there. So is there any look you are looking for? Is there any changes will be there, like new products will be built up on basis of without touching, you can operate your switches or something like that, or maybe product solution like voice command switches like Alexa or maybe Google Home, or maybe gesture control switches are also maybe in a trend. So are you looking for these kind of changes will happen in our industry also?
Yes. Yeah, sure, Puni, you go ahead.
Okay. You see, you're talking about, see, there are different elements to touchless technology. We've had the swipe card scenario, and it's there in hotels as we speak. And then there's also this thermal sensitive lighting. You you walk into a room and the lights pop on. But that's a technology that's in vogue right now. What is actually truly innovative is voice technology. And as far as voice technology goes, China is the market leader. They are actually the biggest producers of smart speakers in the world. They have taken voice technology to a different level. You have to remember that voice, like the fingerprint, is very distinct from one human being to another one. the tone, the tenor, everything is very, very different. So you can actually program your switches, your doors, your TV remotes to voice activation. And it's fantastic because China is now the market leader for voice technology. They're using it for all different sectors. They've started with homes, with hospitals. It's very big in hospitals because then you don't need to touch anything. It's also very big in hotels. South Korea is also another market leader for voice technology. And this is kind of important because you don't need to touch anything. It all goes by voice. This business of fingerprint is gone. This business of, the iris, eye recognition is also gone. So voice technology in my mind is going to be very big. And I'm looking for at 2030. In 2030, voice technology will grow 10 times than the times that we are looking at right now. It will be 10 times. And it is also linked to something called robos, which all of us are familiar with, and artificial intelligence. There's actually a spin-off of artificial intelligence. And so voice activation is actually very good for industries like education. It's become a learning tool today. It's also very good for homes. We're talking about intelligent homes. It's good in hospitals. Today, you will not believe robotic surgery is so common in a place like Chennai. We are building hospitals with for robotic surgery. And in robotic surgery, a lot of voice activation is important. So we're even having humanoids, that move around in. This is happening in China. Humanoids will actually take part in all the mundane tasks of doctors and nurses. There's something called a Grace chat box that has been introduced by Provident Healthcare Services in US, where people can talk to a robo or a human. I'm just calling it humanoid, but that's actually a smart speaker, where you talk about your symptoms, and then the device actually calibrates, analyzes your problem, suggests diagnosis, and indeed even issues a prescription. Voice technology is going to be very good for shopping. No longer do you have to speak to a person on the other end. The robot would just take your instructions, pass it on to the grocery person, whoever, pack your stuff, and then it gets delivered home. Voice activated technology is also going to be very good for senior citizens, for managing mental health. Remember, in COVID times, mental health has become a huge challenge. A lot of people have become very depressed staying at home. And the latest studies from Harvard University suggest that managing mental health has been very good with voice-activated technology. Don't ask me the details, but these are the ongoing developments as we speak. So I think voice activation is going to be the in thing, the next frontier of technology. It's going to replace fingerprint. It's going to replace eye recognition, etc. It's going to be fantastic. That's my take.
So my two-bit on that would be, I think the first part of the question that Bharat asked was, what about surfaces? I mean, because people are paranoid about touching surfaces these days, because of an infection. So would they be welcoming surfaces or more touchless solutions? So, and the second part was on, of course, voice technology, which Puni has so nicely answered. So I'll take the first part. Yes, definitely, people are really paranoid of, catching an infection through surface contact. And I recently did a study for a corporate client of mine, where their office building houses around 1,200 people. So the obvious question is, when 1,200 people come to work, how are they going to reduce contact? And which are the touch points? You enter office, you show your RFID card. Okay, you get beyond that, then you have to press the lift button. What then? How do you drop that? How do you remove that touch interference? What is the solution to that? You enter the lift, then you have to press the button for your floor. How do you reduce that contact? You are in a meeting room. You've just had a meeting about 4 to 5 people. The next people come in. They have to feel reassured or safe that the meeting room table is disinfected. So how do you cater to that? You go to a cafeteria. The cafeteria is a place where you can get major infections. So how do you cater to that? So these are the day-to-day things that we provided them solutions, and most of the solution came from surfaces that would harbor less bacteria or viruses. Solutions that would be touchless. Like if you have to, when you're entering a lift, you can create an app which can come on your phone. It can be a code, and you show that on the lift buttons, and the lift will just stop at your floor. So at no point have you touched, any buttons in the lift. If you go to the washroom, you wash your hands, you're all sanitized and everything, but just before leaving the washroom, you have to pull the doorknob. So then what's the solution for that? I mean, you're not sanitizing that. So different kind of hardware. On a daily basis, what are the solutions? You don't realize, you never realize that how all of these things will impact in a way that you could catch an infection. So what is the solution for that? So we worked out all of that in a 75-page report for them, and very interesting solutions came up. I mean, there is technology for almost eliminating human touch on a surface almost everywhere. So if I've just finished a meeting, as I said, and the next group of people, before the next group of people comes in, not only is the meeting room cleaned, but it can be absolutely disinfected with the help of UV lights. So there are solutions like that. For one of our hospitality clients, of course, hospitality has taken a major hit because of COVID, but they also needed solutions like that, where how people would feel safe coming into a place. So we looked into air conditioning. So air conditioning almost picks up the air, and if an infected person sneezes and throws the virus into the atmosphere, the AC ducts would pick up that, and how to eliminate that infection from spreading throughout the office. So many things we had touched upon. Uh, so practically people are paranoid, and rightly so. And I think they're really looking at solutions that would make their life more sanitized. That is, they have to reduce, they don't have to touch as many surfaces as they did. They want to lead more sanitized lives. And it is a good message to send across, whether it is in your home or your office, that how everybody cares for you. A corporate can really send out a great message to their employees saying that, look, guys, we have put all these measures in place to make your office a very safe place to come when you come back to work. So yes, people are going to look for all these solutions. And the second part of the question on voice-based technology, Puni definitely answered. I am not going to touch upon that. So we can go on to the next one.
Thank you so much, Puni ma'am and
Thank you, ma'am.
Santa. Yeah. We have a lot of questions in the chat. Definitely, we'll try to cover most of them towards the end. So, I would request you all to stay tuned in. We will just complete with one question. I guess our product designer's mic is not working. So, Chakri, if you want, I can ask a question for you, or if because if your mic is not working, maybe I'll ask that question for Chakri. So, this was basically keeping the design in mind. So, will the definition of the antibacterial products like fabrics, switches, paints change from luxury to necessity? Since before COVID, we always had this antibacterial microbial products. It wasn't that during COVID they've started coming, right? So, will it change the definition of it post COVID? Puni ma'am, maybe you'd want to take that.
Um, to answer your question, I'm going to say that antibacterial products are going to be a must-have. It's no longer a can-have.
Yeah.
And when I talk about antibacterial products, we're talking about a whole gamut of products. We're talking about electrical switches that are antibacterial. The hospitals that we did, we insisted on using antibacterial switches. We're using antibacterial paint. Remember, paint is your frontline warrior in a building. Exterior paint as well as interior paint. So you have paints today which have antibacterial content in them. They actually absorb the toxin and converts it into water vapor. There are companies who even do that. Also, you have antibacterial surfaces, antibacterial hardware. And when I say antibacterial, it's nothing but antibacterial microbial coating on the products. You also have solid surface that is antibacterial. You also going to have antibacterial furnishing. I'm talking about soft furnishings that's being researched and produced in the US as we speak. People are taking the skin of crustaceans. It's supposed to be highly antibacterial, using organic materials and then creating a very antibacterial product that is conducive to recycling and reusing. So all of these antibacterial products are going to, and let them, before I forget, I want to mention tiles. Japan has been the market leader for producing antibacterial wall tiles and floor tiles. And our companies, tile companies sitting in India also have upped their ante. They've also started producing this antibacterial, flooring, tiles, even vinyl flooring for hospitals. So a lot of products that used to be in the hospital realm is now creeping and going into the housing, the hotel, institutional. I mean, we changed all our specifications overnight during this COVID time because a lot of projects are going on. The only issue is the availability of materials, transporting them from place A to place to location B. So indeed, yes, antibacterial is going to be a must-have. It's no longer a can-have. And if you look at Oriental countries, I'm talking because we do business with China, with Malaysia, with Taiwan, and the Far Eastern countries. If you look at their spec list, and I'm talking about our practice with them for the past 10 years, it has always been antibacterial products. I'm saying for a past decade, and I'm sure they've been using it a long way ago. And why did this happen? The reason is Oriental countries, I'm going back to China, they've always had an ancient history of viral infections. And why viral infections? It is a diet they consume. A lot of wildlife is consumed, and therefore there is a transfer of virus from animal to humans. And so what they've done is they've created surfaces and a lot of systems that actually take care of viral infections. And if you see those countries, and I'm even talking about South Korea, they've all jumped back. They've all jumped back to the I wouldn't say new normal, but no one's wearing masks in China anymore. At least what I've seen in the recent past. They say that there's a second wave coming in December. Hopefully that doesn't happen. But everyone's jumped back to business, and the GDP of those countries are growing, as opposed to countries like US and India, where we are still sitting and reacting to the reactions. So to answer your questions, it's going to be a must-have. It's not a can-have anymore.
Thank you so much, Santa. I would like you to answer the second part of the question. I'm sure Puni ma'am has pretty well covered the change from luxury to the necessity. What do you think? Would this demand of the demand of such products change and vary from metro to non-metro cities? Or is it just the same?
I wouldn't say metro to non-metro. Yes, it would. On the surface, it will look like it's varying from metro to non-metro, but it would actually be public places and residential places where there is a large gathering of people. Like I just spoke about, an office space having 1,200 people. So most of those places are, how do you say, centered in the metros. So obviously, they will look at solutions to keep their employees safer. So there will be, the metros, there'll be a larger demand of bacterial surveillance because human contact is so much more. More people using public transport, more people going to offices, that many schools, that many large residential complexes. So definitely there will be more of a demand in metros. But having said that, like Pony also said, so many of these things are already in place. We already have carpets that have biocides embedded in them, which actually discourage the promotion of bacteria. Now, although we are dealing with the viral infection, we are talking antibacterial surfaces, but at the base of it, we are all talking of a much more hygienic environment. We're talking about disinfectant sprays and room cleaning sprays that will kill all viruses, UV lights that will kill all viruses. So basically, we're talking of a much more sanitized environment. So people are going to keep on inventing and asking for solutions to create, air purifiers and so on. So yes, there's going to be a huge demand in all of this.
Thank you so much, Santa. I'm sure these were the questions our product designer, Mr. Chakravarti, wanted to ask. In case if he has more to ask, maybe we'll try to wait for his mic to get fixed and we can, he can always ask the questions towards the end. I have this question from one of the architects from Jaipur. And he wanted to know from both of you all, because he was facing this challenge, that how will the availability of the products post lockdown impact the designs of architects. So if maybe Santa, you would want to take this first. How would
so at the moment also I'm on one of my sites. and I've just finished a meeting where we're actually trying to see how we're going to finish this and the interiors of a very large penthouse here in time. And the biggest problem is we're not getting materials. But we will still figure out the way around materials. If we don't get in Bombay, we'll go to Jaipur, we'll go wherever and we'll figure it out. If we don't get something what we really wanted, we can look at a substitute. It's not that the work is going to stop. That won't happen. But I also feel that the biggest hampering in project completions will be material deliveries, material availabilities, but also labor. So the conscious decision that we made today was that we wanted to put a nice Italian marble inlay in the lobby. So we said, okay, I mean, we're buying expensive marble, but currently we do not have skilled labor to apply that material. So actually there are going to be a lot of factors, a lot of challenges that are going to come in the days ahead. Material availability, one, labor management, labor availability, second, that is going to majorly hamper project timelines especially. And in case you have to achieve those deadlines, timelines, and in case you have to achieve those projects in a certain budget, then you have to look at the next best option. There is no other way to it.
Thank you so much. Puni ma'am, before you answer this question, I also wanted to just highlight one factor. That particular architect wanted to design this entire farmhouse or a bungalow based on a particular stone. So his entire design revolved around that one material, which was stone. So in that case, since it's not available, maybe if you were there, or are you facing some similar challenges, maybe you can throw some light.
Okay, my favorite material is natural stone. I love marble. I love granite. Of course, I do a lot of tile work too, but I absolutely empathize with my colleague, with this architect who's having difficulties with stone. See, it's like this. It all depends on the size of the project. It also depends on the timeline of completion of the project. Because I'm facing the same problem today, and I have told my client very clearly, if you want to meet your deadlines, then you have to compromise on material. And when you're pumping in that much amount of money for projects, and I'm talking stone is not exactly a cheap material, wait for a little bit, wait for about 3 months, and then we'll think of bringing in the material. Because remember, COVID is it's a bump or blip in the horizon. That's it. Things are going to get normal at some point in time. So if deadlines cannot be stretched, and I'm not sure what issue this particular architect has. If the deadline is an issue, then you'll just simply have to move to substitutes. I mean, I'm facing the same problem myself. We need a certain kind of marble that needed to come from Rajasthan. Not going to happen. Not going to happen the next 3 months. I also know it. So what we've done is we've procured, granite, white granite. We've done a few compromises then. The saddest part is that you'll have to now change the design vocabulary, period. So your mind has to quickly go into solutions of, trying to keep the original intent, use natural material, but move into a different, type of stone. So we're using granite now, very light color granite. Not my favorite material for this particular instance, but you'll have to just make do.
Yeah.
So these are instances where we will need to, just go with the flow, go with what is available, because timeline, building construction industry, time is of defense. I don't have to say this. I'm sure all of our audiences realize this.
Yeah.
So this is just what we do. We just look at a different material and keep going. That's the best thing to do right now. Coming to your question about other products, and I'm talking about electrical switches, I'm talking about just about any other lighting fixtures. We're facing that problem today. So what we're doing is we're talking to dealers from neighboring towns. So dealers may have stock, so we're like trying to get stocks from A, B, C dealers and trying to make do. And it's amazing I just discovered the positive sides of dealer networks. When it comes to a scenario like this, just about everyone is ready to help out. That's a nice side of human nature. So yes, we are exploring ways and means of trying to sourcing materials from different dealers. We are also switching brands, by the way. Can't help it. Just can't help it.
Yeah.
To meet deadlines. So these are pros and cons of the building industry in times of COVID. And mind you, brands are also helping. They're trying to get generic products for us. So this is what's happening, and these are natural challenges which we face up and keep going. Yeah.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Santa and Puni ma'am. Our next question would be asked by Sameer sir. So,
Hi.
yeah.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
See, my question I will come later slightly, but let me at the outset thank both of you. I am very sure it has been very informative for the architects who are listening and the interior designers who are listening, because it started from west and south and then it percolated down to post-COVID and the product. But for people like us, where we are looking forward to what next, I think there has been a lot of information, right from the touchless design, right from what we should be looking in residential places and commercial places, what Santa told about the germ-free things. And now when Puni just said that, okay, if people are ready to switch brands, so we need to be agile. So I think brands also are, maybe we are getting a lot of information and maybe insights that what should be we looking forward to in coming future in these times. So coming down to the question which I wanted to ask particularly, we have covered the safety through COVID and how do we maintain it through germ-free and antimicrobial. We have also covered what technology will come in, like touchless or voice-based, as Puni Madam said and Santa said about touchless. What we are also seeing now is how the aesthetics will change. I just wanted to ask something on that. It is a layman's question where we say that today, when I go in a house, I do not know how do I, if we do something on our own, we would like to see the curtains, we would start from the tiles or we would start from the walls. We started thinking that why not, our switches are on the walls, so why not probably think about the walls, what is the switch, how it will feel, how it will look on the walls. So we started thinking on those lines. But from an architect or interior designer point of view, we actually wanted to ask you, how do you actually envisage or come out with what to start with? If you have a bare space, whether it is curtains, whether it is flooring, whether it is walls, or whether what design pattern, what is that generally in the thought, so that we get certain insight about how should we look forward to in future about our designing our product and our design philosophy. So if I can ask Puni Madam to start with, and then probably with Santa.
Sure, sure. At Oscar and Pune Architects, I wear 3 hats. I get involved in urban design projects, I get involved in architecture, and I also get involved in interior design, but chiefly architecture and interior design. So I'll split my answer in 2 parts. So when I'm wearing the architect's hat and I'm actually designing a building, my first concern is site geometry, site context, and design vocabulary, because design vocabulary is what sets the tone and style of the building. I'll come to interiors in a bit. And also, we need to look at climatology, a climatology of a certain site. So when we did the project in Malaysia, the brief was very clear, Chettinad Home. But what we did was we imbibed fused two styles of architecture, that is Indian Chettinad architecture and Malay architecture. And strangely, we found there were a lot of similarities. So I think it is a design vocabulary when it comes to architecture. Let's say if you're doing a contemporary design, then everything becomes very simple, straight line, very zen. But when you do a very traditional design, then heritage design, then the design vocabulary changes. So I think for me in architecture, the design vocabulary and the style and the site context and site geometry is what determines my project. Now let's flip to interiors. In interiors, again, it's design vocabulary. What are you going to create? Is it going to be a ultra modern interior, or is it going to be a very classical interior? So the design vocabulary creeps in. But for me, it's always been the flow component. I always fix my flow material first, and the color vocabulary is picked up from the floor component for the interiors. And if you see interiors, you have 3-4 components. You have the flooring, walls, ceiling, and then of course the furniture. So I start off with the flow, pick the colors from there, and then if the design vocabulary is indeed heritage, then we bring in motifs and borders and what have you, and the colors are all picked up from there, put onto the walls. The motifs from the flow is what happens in the on the wall treatment as well, and that goes to the ceiling. So we did this home in Malaysia, and what we did was we took the floor motif and then transferred it to the ceiling. So then when you looked at the interior, there's a complete cohesiveness. So that's typically what I do. For me, the flooring is very important. I'm a great lover of marble. I use marble left, right, and center. I love Indian marble, by the way, a lot of Indian green, yellow marbles. And of course, I use a lot of Italian marble also. I've also used granite. Granite is also another favorite material of mine. I use a lot of rough granite. So then what happens is that interior becomes very gray and stuff. Let's look at projects like resorts. We do a lot of resorts in the Andaman Nicobar Islands, in the Maldives, and then a lot of resorts inside of India as well, in the mainland. And over there, again, design vocabulary counts. And what I do is I use a lot of wood in there. Resorts for me is all wood based. At least I like to use a lot of wood and like to use a lot of granite. When it comes to projects like hotels, and we do a lot of 5-star hotels, again, the design vocabulary is very critical. If it's a modern interior, then of course we use a lot of marble with zero designs, no inlays, it's all plain. If it's a very traditional hotel, we did a French style hotel in Pondicherry, where we use a lot of inlays, and the inlays came in from classical Russian design. So these are the components that I would pick on, and they become the main diktats of design in any segment, whether it's hospitality or it's home or if it's offices and such. These are my priorities while designing.
Thank you. I think that is really informative and maybe useful to us in large manner, because we in our products have come out with lot many material plates. When we call it, it is a glass plate to go with the places like hotels. We have wooden plates which basically go with the residences in the different shades, and then probably the aluminum, which basically also can be used at many other places. So I think this is very informative. We will be using more of this and maybe including in our design philosophy. I will suggest this to our product designer Chakri. How can we incorporate this in our design philosophy to see that we take the whole design philosophy together while we also develop our products? And maybe we can take inputs from architects, how, like you, what design philosophy would suit for the products when we design the products. Santa, if I can come to you, how do you look forward to this thing? But when we go into the house, what do we do? Because I am more interested, I can be more candid with you. I'm more interested about how should we think when we select the products or design a product as a brand. But you, in any case, architects and interior designer must be wanting to know how inside you are wanting to actually, when you come out with some design, what is your thinking overall about it?
Sure. So every architect has their own process, right, of how they visualize a certain space. The first visualization immediately starts when you meet a client, and they start giving a feedback. You're trying to understand them, what are their likes, and you're forming a mental image. How I go about, or how we go about in our studio, is we are very style centric. So we are trying, we show people a lot of images, try to make them react. Because actually, sometimes even finally, any space you're creating is for your client. You are enabling his visualization to be translated into a 3D space. So I wouldn't like to say I want to superimpose my preferences on a client. I would rather understand what they like. And many times clients are not able to articulate some things well. So that comes out once you throw a lot of images at them, so you get an understanding of what is their preferences. So that is my process. I mean, we show them images, we try and understand what they want. And honestly, no style is really good or bad. And your job as an architect is to translate that into the best possible fashion, right? So we are very style oriented. So currently we're doing a British colonial kind of interiors. We finished a French boudoir kind of interiors. So once the style is fixed, then we go along selecting the right materials. And I always go, like Pony also said, floor, then the walls, then furniture, then the curtains and lights. So that's what then creates the entire image of a place, whether it is your residence or whether it is your hospitality space, your hotel room. So that's the style. So, but essentially you need to get the big picture first clear. You have to have clarity on the larger picture. I need this style. I need the Chettinad style, or I need, a Rajasthani palace, or I need something very English. English style country house or whatever. And then you break that into your smaller design components. And then you look for materials that fit in, the colors that fit in. That's how your design palette would evolve. That's my process. I'm sure other architects follow their own process, but you could give it a shot if you're doing your house or something. Then you could follow that process. I'm sure it will
Sure,
yield
that is
your good results.
it's very informative. I think it is definitely informative for all the architects over here, and it is actually also very informative for brands like us who want to follow a design philosophy based on the architect's thought process.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I would not, we have one more question left, but since it's already 6 and there are a lot of questions, and I don't want all our architect, interior designer friends to keep waiting more. So is it okay if I ask that question later and we can open up for Q&A?
Sure.
If that's okay with you and
I think
Santa?
Ankita, that would be better. We are already
Yeah.
at 6. Let us open
Yeah.
up because
Yeah. So first of all, I mean, I have many questions, but then I would like to call upon architect Krushit Shah. He has asked few questions on the chat. So if you want to come on video and ask Punni ma'am, and yeah, he's here. So thank you.
Hello everyone.
Hello.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, yes, you're audible.
So, madam, my question is, till now we have been seeing a trend where a tier 3 and tier 4 architecture firm collaborates with bigger firm in metro cities for their expertise to handle large scale projects in their own area. And in a current scenario of COVID, where travels are restricted, we don't want our employees to travel in those remote areas. So are we seeing a reverse trend here, where metro city architects should start collaborating with tier 3, tier 4 architects? And what should be done, in this right direction for this collaboration? If you can throw some light in it.
I'll go first. Okay, we've had instances, and COVID has been a nice catalyst in actually creating collaboration between metro city architects and tier 2 and tier 3 cities. It's a good thing to have, very good thing to have. And what we insist on, that is being principal architects ourselves, is that we insist on the design intent, not to be watered down, and once that agreement is reached and you're on the same page, I don't see a problem at all. It's actually very productive. We've seen situations where architects from smaller cities refer larger projects in their cities. So
Yes.
it's business end of the day. So I think it's a good thing to have. We've got referrals, and then we collaborate with the tier 3 architect because their exposure to large scale projects may be small. So I think it's a good trend. It's a good trend, and honestly, I love to interact with tier 2 and tier 3 cities because they have a different philosophy of thinking, and they also come with some very interesting localized solutions. So I think it's a win-win scenario for both parties if we're all on the same page. And I think you need to get a very enlightened client to take the best out of both architects, the principal architect and the local architect. So everyone's happy at the end of the day. So I think it's a good thing to have.
Thank you.
Yeah. Santa, you would
Yeah.
like to...
Acha, yeah, actually, it's quite positive what's happening, and there's a lot of cross learning that happens as they get to learn on a different style of working, a different scale of project. And I have always seen that architects from tier 2 and tier 3 cities definitely put in a lot of effort on doing minute detailing, which we in the larger cities look at the larger picture. We draw with a broader brush, and the architects in the tier 2 cities are more focused on the minor detailing. So it's a good cross learning to happen. It saves people from traveling to different places, especially given these times. So I think it's a win-win situation for everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for answering. Thank you.
Thank you. We had architect Akshay Ved have a question. In case if he's there, I would either want him to ask, or I can read out the question. This question he had for Punni ma'am and Santa both. So if he's there, he can read out the question. I'll quickly read out the question, and maybe you both can answer. It says, I would request Santa and Puni ma'am to throw some light on their experience and architecture in the northern side of the country. Being from Delhi, it would be lovely to get some insights about their experience of working in Delhi. Apart from the history, the other question that I wanted to ask was from a practical point of view. How do you think that architecture and building services would change after the COVID-19 situation? For example, the circulation of air in the building by HVAC system or an architectural standpoint, multi-use or collaborative and co-working spaces, or a space like a call center. How is all this going to change? So yes,
That's
it's
a lot of questions in one question.
yeah.
So,
If in case you're there, Mr. If Architect Akshay Vaidya, if you're there, it would be you would be able to maybe explain in a much better way. I was just reading out from the chat. So if in case it's okay if you don't want to come on video, then they can answer the question. So
he says he will.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so Shanta, you want to go ahead.
I guess Akshay wants to come on board and ask,
Yes.
or I think Ankita has done a good job of reading out his question, and I think we can take it from there. So Akshay, your first part of your question starts with working in the northern part of India, especially in Delhi, and how was the experience there? So done a few projects in Delhi. The work atmosphere is very different from Bombay. Maybe I'm used to Bombay, but so I find Bombay more, how do you say, professional. Not that Delhi is any less professional, but of course there are differences, at least in the way people deliver projects. So especially with the labor and the material deliveries and so on, even with people you deal with, there are, I would say, slightly flashier lights given in the north, but that's more now. What I have spoken is more for a private project. But coming to government projects, I think it works just the same anywhere. I mean, if you're in Delhi or Chandigarh or Jammu or anywhere, a government project is the same. They follow the same standards. There's nothing different out there. So what were the second, third, and fourth part of Akshay's question? Puni, would you like to take that on?
Sure. I think they were talking. He was talking about HVAC systems and with that will have some impact. Not only HVAC, building service systems. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ankita.
I will just quickly read out. It was, of course, HVAC, but apart from the history, the other question he wanted to know was from practical point that architecture, how do you think that architecture and building services would change after the COVID-19 situation? For example, the HVAC systems and then the building parts, yes.
Okay, there's going to be a sea change, a great sea change in architecture and building services. It's happening as we speak. We've experienced it in our project ourselves. As far as architecture goes, this is something we're talking about. I'm talking about sustainable architecture, and we've been as architects, shouting hoarse from the rooftops. We've been talking about introducing more courtyards, more cross ventilation, lesser use of structural glazing. This blind use of structural glazing is not a great idea. It's not a win-win situation. In architecture, you will need to bring in more nature into buildings. You will need to bring in more natural air changes into the building. And mind you, if I'm not mistaken, state governments, at least in Tamil Nadu, we are reformatting our norms of bringing natural air changes into buildings. And we're talking about residential buildings, we're talking about commercial buildings, we're talking about institutional buildings. This is going to be the norm. There's also going to be norms where we need to bring in courtyards wherever possible. There's going to be norms bringing in nature, because the more you interact with nature, the more you have natural ventilation, it's actually a source of positive energy. And remember, an air-conditioned environment is a petri dish for culture of bacteria and viruses. It's really bad. At least I know the Tamil Nadu government is bringing in norms where you'll need to have 2 windows per room or per square feet. There's some kind of norm that's being worked out where there will have to be openable windows. whether it's going to be glazing, non-glazing, what have you. But certainly architecture is going to be changing in terms of trying to create natural surroundings and lessen the use the growth of bacteria and viruses. That's one point. The second point is that building services. We're talking about MEP here, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. Let's take HVAC. HVAC, you'll need to bring in more treated fresh air units. Normally, clients don't, because of the budget issues, they try to, reduce the number of treated fresh air units. And treated fresh air units, in my mind, I'm not an aircon expert, but the little I know about air conditioning, because we do a lot of commercial spaces, treated fresh air units will have to bring in more of them. Number one. Number two, you'll have to bring in more air changes in aircon units. The limited air changes that we're seeing per hour is not going to work. So I see the AC industry needs to tweak its aircon systems, look at it, relook at a COVID sort of scenario. Otherwise, people are going to go back to natural ventilation just because you want to be safe. Nobody wants to die. So I think safety will take more leverage than cost. We've already talking to a lot of clients and builders who are talking about, yes, maybe we should increase the window size. Maybe we should bring in more lures in. Maybe we should have a manual override to air conditioning services. Now, regarding plumbing, I'll come to plumbing. Specifications have all changed. We're looking at touchless faucets here. We are looking at no-touch, sanitary items. We're looking at more air changes in toilets. That's going to be big. Let's look at, electrical, like I said, antibacterial switches, which indeed L&T has done a lot of work and a lot of product development. There's also going to be a lot of UV lighting. That is one area in lighting. You won't believe it. Prisons in the United States use a lot of UV lighting to clean areas. They've gotten away with mops, the traditional mopping of floors, that's all gone. People are using UV lighting to kill bacteria and viruses. So I'm seeing that segment creeping in a lot. Smart lighting, manufacturers would look at UV lighting. And that is going to be big in hospital sectors, in the healthcare field. So these are, building services that I'm seeing will change a lot. And like I said, you're going to have more antibacterial, components creeping into the services sector. I hope that answers. And coming to the question, we've done in buildings pan India, Delhi, Orissa, Gujarat. I mean, we've even done buildings in Kashmir, by the way, and we've done huge projects. There are cultural differences that I see, and I find people up north, being a South Indian myself, they are more time bound. I've seen sometimes there's conflicts in using materials, and like I said, life is a problem solving process, so we work around challenges. We did a huge Tech Mahindra park in Orissa, and it was lovely to work with the teams there. We had gotten I don't remember the name of the contractor, very big contractor, but we used local labor. And it's amazing what I discovered about Orissa. When we did that large, it was our first project, by the way, first tech project we did. So yes, I think locations can change, but if you get the right team, you're going to finish your project on time. We did a fabulous project in Kolkata. Of course, we got contractors from Mumbai, so we were able to finish up things in a timely fashion. So it depends on the team that you put in. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much. Yes, he's messaged that it was a very apt answer. Before continuing, I would like to welcome Milind sir. Milind sir, welcome. Sorry for the, I think there was some interruption from his side. I would like to welcome Santa and Puni ma'am. We have architect Milind Pai join us here with us. So just wanted to welcome him.
Hi,
yes, Milind sir, if you do have any question or if you want to have a quick chat with Puni ma'am and Santa, you're more than, you can always keep the video on. There is some disturbance. Wanda, can you just put everybody else on mute, please? Yeah, sorry for that. I think somebody's audio was not mute. Okay. We have a lot of more questions. I think our product designer wanted to ask something, but again, I think there's a problem with his mic. Chakri, is your mic okay? Chakri, your mic. I think there is a problem with your Chakri. You're not audible. We have unmuted everyone, so we have not kept anyone in mute. I think there is some issue. Maybe is it okay if we carry on with architect's questions? Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. I know, ma'am. Before continuing with the questions, I wanted to ask you both and everyone else also. It's 6:20, which is beyond the time. So we have a few more questions. If you both are okay, then we can answer those questions, or we can call it a session. So I just wanted to check with you guys because I'm sure you must be having other commitments as well.
So I think another 10 minutes we'll stretch it.
Yeah. What
10
about
minutes should be fine.
Yeah, that's fine. I think Shanta's right.
Yeah, so because we have one more question to go, so I've kept it at last. We have the last question to go, so I'll ask that later. So yes, Puni ma'am, we had a couple of questions for you. I'll just quickly read out all of them at once. So maybe you want to answer them. They were on the same lines.
Okay.
Just a second. 1 second. So there was one question, Puni ma'am, how would you look for the design when it comes to the steel structure that are built now? Example for malls, airports, cinemas, etc. That was one question. There was another question for both of you. Madams, greetings. Green engineering buildings are the need of the hour. How would architects integrate the rooftop solar solutions into their plans at the design stage itself? So in case if we can wind this up quickly, then maybe, we can take these questions because...
Okay, so shall I go ahead with about the steel structures?
Sure.
Yes, please. I'll take the second one. Yeah.
Okay. Ankita, are we on?
Yes, ma'am.
You see, back in New York, where I worked in New York, we worked only with steel structures. As you know, the American building construction industry works chiefly with steel. So I'm very used to this concept of steel. It's just that when I came back to India, we had to slip into using concrete a lot more. But for some reason, steel has crept back into the realm of building construction in at least in South India. And I think, and this is my personal feeling, that steel is a very versatile material. You can bend it to any shape. You can finish it very quickly. And you just need the number of laborers you require is a lot less. So I think it is a very efficient material to use. If you have the right structural consultants, I think this is definitely a viable method of using steel as a major component in building construction. Definitely very good, and it's good for malls and cinemas and cinema theaters and indeed even institutional designs. We use a lot of steel in factory buildings. In Oscar and Pony Architects, we use a lot of steel in factory buildings. So we're very used to steel as a primary component of building construction. Indeed, it's really very good. I would subscribe to it.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Hope that's answered the question. Santa, you would want to go for the second question?
Yeah, can you just repeat the second? I kind of lost track with that one.
Okay, just a second.
Sorry.
I'll just scroll. There are many questions. Just give me a second. 1 second. Yes, the second question was on the green buildings.
Green buildings, yeah.
Yes.
So he says, are green buildings the need of the hour? They were always the need of the hour. But I believe not only in green architecture, but I believe in responsible architecture. So every architect, whether their building is getting a certification or not, I think we should always design keeping the building low maintenance, lesser impact on the environment, right use of materials, right procurement, location from where you procure the material. So all of this goes into being a very responsible building. Some people label it as a green building, but I think this is a given parameter in the design of any building. So it was always important, and yes, it is definitely more so now. I strongly believe that Indians have always been naturally green, upcycling, recycling, whatever it is. But so it's something that comes naturally to us. It's something we're proud of doing, and we should definitely keep on doing it and evolving it more and more.
Thank you so much, Santa. I think that was the last question for now, because I'll ask one question which was for you both, and then maybe we would want to call architect Milind Pai. We don't want to miss out on this opportunity to have a quick chat with him since we have him here. So the last question to both of you, since we have two prominent women personalities amongst us right now, ma'am and Santa, what is your take on women empowerment?
So shall I just go first, Shanta? Is that okay?
Yes, go.
Okay, I have a long stint of fighting with the male establishment. I fight for my undergraduate degree. I turned on medicine, engineering, a whole bunch of other fields, and then went to pay my fees in NIT Trichy, and they wouldn't take me in. And the reason they gave was, "You're a girl. We can't take you." For 50 years, we kept men, and we're very happy. Why would you want to come here, sort of thing. I had to fight with them, and I actually fought with the principal and told him, "Listen, you don't give me this admission, I'm going to take you to the Supreme Court." I'm not talking about eeny-meeny courts like the High Court and the Mid Court. We're going straight to the Supreme Court, because denying women, denying an Indian of education is against the basic tenets of our Constitution. So I've had a long stint with, women's empowerment. I do give a lot of lectures on women's empowerment. But just to quickly take you through, there was this 2030 agenda for women's empowerment by the United Nations. And it touched on 3 subjects. One is economic improvement of women. Second, increasing women in technology. And the third thing is increasing women's participation in politics. And this is my take. The GDP of developed nations are much higher than of the developing nations. And do you know why? It's because you have more women in the workforce. So if India wants to up its ante and become a developed nation and be indeed a superpower, you need to bring more Indian women into the workforce, because we are the units of prosperity and we are the drivers of GDP. My last observation is this. If you take the census of India, we have 50% of women constituting to the population of India. Yet we have only 14% of women sitting in the Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha. So I would demand 50% women participation in parliament, not 33%. The more women sit in parliament, because why would 86% of men make decisions 50% of women? Doesn't make sense at all. So I think more women legislators and policy makers would make our lives a lot more easier. It would be a lot of women-friendly policies. So I have a long, strong views on women's empowerment. And our country is a great country. We've had a very good record of women building our country, and we are indeed nation builders. So, I think India has a long way to go, and indeed it is on the right path. We have a prime minister who actually, talks about women's education and women's empowerment. So I'm sure he will bring in 50% women's participation in the parliament, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. That feels so motivating, especially for me being a woman myself. Yes. Santa, to you.
Yes. So I think it's a favorite topic for all of us, women's empowerment. I seek no different from Pony. I have my different ways of going about it. Yes, I agree that, GDP of developed nations is definitely higher because of women and all of that, because more women are working. Something that goes unchecked and unseen, that there are so many women also working, but without due credit. Check the agricultural sector. There are so many women working there in the agricultural sector, but I don't think their numbers are counted. So when Pony is saying that she needs legislation of more women representation and all of that, I completely agree. But it's not going to happen overnight. It will only happen with each of us helping the other women. People like us who have been given a good education, who are empowered enough to make our own financial decisions, or any decision, let's say, it is our duty to help other women. I have done it with the women who have worked in my office. Like Pony said in the beginning of the conversation, that she was helping the women in her office do it, work from home. So I have done that. I have been more relaxed with the women in my office, especially the mothers, and I understand how they are juggling. I'm saying I'm more relaxed in the sense I'm not expecting lesser work from them, but I am more flexible with them. So I am doing my bit, and I know it will go a long way to get more and more women into the workforce, get more and more women empowered, and then rightly so, the right numbers will come in the legislation, the right number of leaders will be heading, the right number of women leaders will be heading power decision-making situations. So I think it is the duty of all of us in every small way to help other women. There are many women who are working without due credit, but it's time to change all. It will happen. If only there was a 14% representation of women in legislation now, think about 50 years ago, kitna kam tha. It was so less. So we have come a long way, and we still have a long way, and it cannot happen without us. And me, especially, who's a mother to a son, it's my duty to educate the men in our lives in the correct manner so they take it forward, and the numbers keep on increasing.
Thank you so much. I'm sure I think it was the perfect way to end this session. Yes, we have Samir sir. Yes, sir. Sir, your audio is on mute. Sir, you have to unmute your audio.
Yeah. I thank Puni Madam and Santa. We all vouch for women empowerment, and I think it's the duty of everybody of us, not only women, that they take them along, but each male and women together, that we see that women are equally empowered, and that is the way the whole nation will grow. That is the only way we can see that when you have a contribution from both, the nation will see a real growth.
Yes. Thank you. Rightly said. It has to be everybody. We realize that where we're lagging behind, and we should all do our bit. And yes, there is a difference. Women are not given the right to equal education. They're not given the right to equal pay. So many things, and we are fighting. And it's great to see people supporting and fighting. And yes, there will be better days when we'll see more women.
Yeah. Yes.
And let me take this opportunity to thank the men of our country. I've had very supportive men in my family, and I have supportive male colleagues in I'm talking about manufacturers, I'm talking about clients, I'm talking about contractors. They've been very good to me. And I think men of this country have done a lot to allow us, or I wouldn't say use the word allow, but to recognize our talents as well. So that's great.
Right, ma'am. I think this is ending at a different note, but it is a very nice note it is ending at. So we started from Southern India, Western India, we went to technology, we went to COVID, we went to the safety, we went to antivirus, and then how do we develop products, how do we incorporate safety into our lives, how do we see that the common man also today finds himself safe by using a proper products of antimicrobial and all. And I think we have touched base lot many things in this particular conversation. So I am very sure that this would not only be for an architect and interior designer informative. For us also, it has been really an eye-opener where how do we take forward our thought processes in the products. So both of us, both the fraternities actually have done an excellent job, and I think we are very glad to see you both here.
Thank you. It's been completely my pleasure.
I would also like to thank everyone and also apologize. I wasn't able to answer, and we were not able to take every question because of time constraints. Puni ma'am and Santa have been very kind to already stretch it for half an hour. So yes, we will call it a session. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much, Santa. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.